Good morning and welcome to our BCP Cabinet meeting for December. What I'd like to do first actually is to also welcome Jess Gibbons, who's our new Chief Operating Officer. We're delighted that Jess starts with us today and she's joining us online. So welcome, Jess. We're very much looking forward to working with you. I'll move now to Sarah Colwick to read out the housekeeping document.
Good morning. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and please mute or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If you are accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please indicate your wish to do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. And finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so move now to the formal agenda. So agenda item 1 is apologies. I believe we have no formal apologies to date. Okay, yeah, so we'll note Toby Johnson's apologies. He's at a fire authority meeting. Okay, thank you. So then we move to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for items on this agenda? Not seeing that, so that moves us to agenda item 3. Sorry, we seem to have some feedback here, so hopefully somebody can sort that. That moves us to agenda item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes. I'm happy to propose the minutes as put in the agenda. I believe Councillor Broadhead, you were seconding. Thank you. Any comments on the minutes we have in front of us? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So that moves us to. Sorry, apologies. We need to take a vote on that item. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Moving on to agenda item 4, public issues. We've had no questions or petitions submitted on this occasion, but 9 statements have been submitted in relation to agenda item 17, which is a call-in decision of Tatnam Road ETRO. So our clerk, Sarah Colwick, will be reading those statements out now, I believe, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. The first statement has come in from Brian Gracie. As a resident of Tatnam Road, my belief is that this road should be reopened. It already is, effectively, to motorcycles and motor scooters. Continuing closure will have an equally negative effect, particularly when the similarly ill-thought-out changes to Wimborne Road take place in the near future. I would make one further observation. HGV traffic could usefully be banned from Tatnam Road. It really is not wide enough and was regularly used as an escape route for vehicles missing signs noting the weight limit over the nearby railway bridge. The second statement is from Linda Naylor. I'm a grandparent of a child at Oakdale Junior School, where I'm also chair of governors. As a cyclist, I am delighted with the blocking of Tatnam Road and Birds Hill. Both make my cycle to SML Church and to school meetings much safer, which encourages me not to use my car. My granddaughter now cycles home from school because the Tatnam Road closure allows her to cycle to Old Town area without crossing any roads. If reopened, she will no longer be safe cycling home. I used to pick her up at Tatnam Road, and Paul High and Oakdale parents can now safely collect there. The next one is from Teresa Trafford. As a resident of Tatnam Road, I wish to put the case forward to continue with the closure. 1, this is a residential road, not a cut-through to save a few minutes journey time. 2, the closure has been welcomed by walkers, runners and cyclists. 3, there has been no significant increase in traffic on neighbouring roads. 4, the road is no longer a rat run, putting children at risk. And 5, the closure is in line with government policy on reducing traffic and encouraging people to exercise. The next statement comes from the Keyhole Bridge User Safety Group. Your LCWIP identifies Tatnam Road as part of the primary cycling network, creating a corridor stretching from Stanley Green Road to Whitecliffe via Garland Road, Birds Hill Road, Poole Park and Keyhole Bridge. Reopening Tatnam Road will increase traffic in Garland Road and Tatnam Road, making the route unsuitable for cycling without significant alternative and potentially costly mitigation. We therefore support Councillor Green's decision to retain the Tatnam Road ETRO. We appreciate that the referral to Cabinet is on procedural grounds, but note that Councillor Green's decision to retain the Tatnam Road ETRO is procedurally entirely consistent with previous decisions. The next statement comes from Corinne and Oliver Martin. We are in full support of Councillor Green's decision to keep the end point closure on Tatnam Road. How will the Council ensure the safety of school children, pedestrians and cyclists on Tatnam Road, should the decision be made to remove the closure? Would the Council be installing severe traffic calming measures such as on Recreation Road prior to removal? The 20-mile-per-hour limit made no changes to speeding prior to the road closure and cannot be seen as a solution to the problem of speeding and reckless driving on this residential road. The next statement comes from David Ricketts. Tatnam Road was closed in relation to Conservative government travel guidelines. However, it's Poole Conservatives who are attempting to reverse this positive decision. On the day of the December 6th meeting, I read on BCP's website the initiative for making school runs much safer, therefore completely at odds with Poole Conservatives' actions. This is obviously a political issue rather than about safety for residents and pedestrians. Poole People Party were voted in because they care about local ward issues, as proven by their support of the road closure. The same wards are disillusioned by Poole Conservatives and their irresponsible actions. The next statement comes from Clive and Bernadette Matlock. We believe clear bias was shown in the room at the 6th of December meeting. The outcome was premeditated and a pointless exercise of going through the motions to justify that predetermined outcome. Our concern is the 15th of December Cabinet meeting will be just as undemocratic. Councillor Green's logical decision was in support of safety concerns, BCP's local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and the new You Can Walk or Scoot to School. Cabinet members must show vision for the long-term safety and environmental benefits of the road closure, and not just seeking populist votes by outlying areas. The next statement comes from Paul Blunden. I support upholding the original closure of Tatnam Road and disregarding the call-in, which was unconstitutional. It lacked any evidence the origin or decision was driven by a bias towards minority opinions. No causal correlation was proven. The committee failed to appreciate that the decision was not based solely on opinions, but drew on other factual sources of information. It's no surprise that local residents are closest to those same facts, in particular road safety issues. Thus, resident views corroborated rather than biased the report. Reopening the road will reduce road safety and consequently make councillors personally liable for accidents. And the last statement comes from Caroline Blunden. I support keeping Tatnam Road closed permanently. Local ward councillors who are closest to the local traffic situation fairly laid out all the facts and could see the untrue objections. I feared the closure would increase my own commute, but in practice this turned out to be untrue. Therefore, the safety benefits outweigh any perceived inconvenience. The call-in sets a dangerous precedent where every decision is subject to individual public opinion rather than councillors fulfilling their duty to act for all constituents, not just a loud minority who have been fuelled by misinformation and overstated the impact of the closure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So we now move on to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. What we'll actually do now is, as we normally do, is bring the chairs of Overview and Scrutiny in on the items as they come up. We're proposing to move to linking with the public statements just made, agenda item 17 to be heard now. So if I have anybody having any issues with that, which I'm not seeing, so we move now to agenda item 17. So this is for me to introduce effectively the call-in decision. So just to remind people of the process, a number of members called in a decision that had been made by the portfolio holder for sustainability and transport in relation to the Tatnam Road Emergency Travel Regulation Order, ETRO. The process for that is then go to Overview and Scrutiny Committee and be heard. That was heard, and I'm just about to bring in the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny to talk about that, how that effectively went. What we'll then do is we'll go to other members of the council to speak, and then Cabinet will debate the item and make a decision effectively. So very happy, pleased now to introduce Councillor Stephen Bartlett, who's Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. Steve.
Yeah, good morning, Leader, and good morning, Cabinet. Yes, as one would anticipate, we had rather a robust debate on this issue. But before I sort of outline the outcome of the debate, I'd just like to say that, you know, there was a misunderstanding, I think, on behalf of an awful lot of people about what the purpose of the call-in actually was. Firstly, the call-in was a valid call-in as determined by the monitoring officer. The role of the Overview and Scrutiny Board was then to check the process by which the portfolio holder had come to the decision. It had nothing to do with the merits of the decision itself, i.e. whether Tapnam Road should remain open or whether it should be closed. It was our job purely to look to see if the decision process was in accordance with Article 12 of the Constitution. The call-in members claimed that it was not in accordance with Article 12 of the Constitution. And what they actually said was, in particular, we believe there has been an over-reliance on the opinion of the ward councillors, and that undue weight has been given to those opinions over and above the wider consultation process. Now, our job was to determine whether we agreed with that statement or whether we did not agree with it. The Overview and Scrutiny Board did actually concur with that view from the call-in members, and it was not a unanimous agreement, it was a majority decision. But I'd like to stress that to refer this back to Cabinet for their review of the decision was not about the merits of the road closure or otherwise. And it has to be understood in that context. And I would also suggest it is actually possible, to agree that the process was incorrect and then refer it to the Cabinet, but at the same time agree with the decision that's been made by the portfolio holder. It is entirely possible you could do that. But in this instance, we're focusing on whether the call-in was valid. It was, and the reasons for it were agreed by a majority decision by the Overview and Scrutiny Board. And I think that's all I really need to say on that, Leader. So we refer the decision for reconsideration by the Cabinet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Councillor Bartlett. Really helpful introduction, and thank you for chairing what was a decent and interesting debate. Okay, so now I'll move to other members of the council to speak. We've got a written statement from Councillor Hadley, who's unfortunately unable to attend today, and we send our our condolences to him in what's a difficult time for his family. I believe Sarah Colwick, you will be reading out that statement, and then I've got Mark Howe to speak as well. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you. Cabinet are invited by Overview and Scrutiny to re-evaluate the decision by the portfolio holder to make the road closure at the Stirp Bridge end of Tapnam Road permanent. I believe this measure has shown significant merit in removing through traffic past the junior schools, aiding choices to undertake commuting and short journeys without the car, promoting personal and public health, and most especially to support sustainable journeys to 3 adjacent schools. These are priorities that support the South East Dorset Local Transport Plan objectives and the transforming travel priorities which the leader and portfolio holder were promoting in the last Facebook Live session. You will know that I am passionate about researching and doing the right thing for our population and in not playing politics with people's lives, especially children. For that reason, I urge you to keep the measure, most especially to listen to the views of the 2 primary school head teachers. They are very clear on the leadership that they must show to the next generation. I hope that you can find it in your hearts likewise to show leadership and to accept that the balance of the decision made by Councillor Mike Green is sound, based on national and local policy, on officer advice, on the views of the local ward councillors, which itself was informed by dealing with the significant, long-standing and growing issues along this road, raised several times at Pool Transport Advisory Group meetings. The view from the two head teachers is clear. Eileen Bessel at Oakdale stated the following: "The measures on Tatnam Road have been highly effective in ensuring children and adult safety. Many families take a shortcut through the Well Lane gate and need to access Tatnam Road in order to do so. So many more children now cycle and scoot to school using this very safe route. We would like the same measures in Palmer Road. Many of these children are unaccompanied. I would fear for their safety should Tatnam Road be reopened. Schools are duty-bound to educate our children and communities about health and safety, environmental issues, etc. It would seem a wholly irresponsible decision to reverse the small steps of progress made to date by the Council. It is quite astonishing that decisions have been made by individuals for political gain and not for moral principles, to remove wind turbines, encourage more traffic and continue to neglect planning for future generations." And Nigel Helm at Longfleet School: "I am in agreement with Eileen. We have seen a marked increase in the numbers of pupils and staff who now cycle to school since this scheme was introduced. In fact, we have had to purchase a new cycle shelter due to the increase in bicycles. As everyone has now got accustomed to which roads are closed to through traffic and presumably made adjustments, it would seem a bit bizarre to go back in time. The world has moved on, and although things may not be universally popular with all members of society, those in positions of responsibility should make decisions based on morals and principles as opposed to social media likes." This simple measure supports all three schools. With the Poole High School to head teacher Paul Gray, it is more complex. He highlighted that cycle to school journeys are 25% up, but claims the closure is endangering lives, and yet changes to traffic management at his school gate impacts the links and other schools. He wants to see the crossing patrol presence retained on Garland Road. The residents of Tatnam Road have long complained of the volume, speed and width of traffic using the narrow road as a cut-through. It has an S-bend in the middle which obscures clear sight. Given the most popular cars have all grown significantly wider over recent years, strikes of parked cars, death of pets and fear to cross the road, cycle along it or leave one's driveway without your car being hit are all increasing problems, in part driven by sat-navs saving seconds off journey times by rerouting traffic. Just as new roads generate new traffic, traffic evaporation is a very well researched phenomenon, which occurs when the journey becomes less attractive. This takes time for people to adjust, and the experimental process has enabled that to occur. Every extra child travelling independently to school is a set of car journeys taken off the network at the busiest times, and that creates capacity for those who still need to travel by car. We cannot pretend supporting modal shift is a pain-free process, and most particularly, we need to protect those people who are prepared to change habits. This measure crosses and is complementary to the transforming travel routes that are currently being designed. We all like to save a little time on our journeys, but Tatnam Road and Garland Road are not an adequate width for the volume of traffic that is attempting to bypass the main road routes along them. They are important for school and commuting using active travel. I urge you to confirm the decision as laid out by the portfolio holder to make the closure permanent.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, now I'll bring in Councillor Mark Howe. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd like to focus on the main issue that the call-in councillors focused on, which was that the supposed undue influence of ward councillors in this decision. The reality is that the closure has been supported by a majority of residents in the road. A petition that has happened since the closure has established that, with a great majority of people actually wanting the closure to be retained. As we've just heard from Councillor Hadley's statement, the local primary school heads are highly supportive, and this closure has facilitated young people cycling into school, which is something that has been a real challenge in the past across the whole of BCP, and it's great that we're seeing that starting to happen. The closure also complies with council and government policy for safer roads, to promote walking and cycling, and for climate change. The objectives that have been listed by objectors fall mainly into two categories. Firstly, that they cause longer journeys, and secondly, that they consume more fuel and therefore are actually bad for climate change. to address measures to address climate change. But in reality, as demonstrated by the evidence in the report, the council officers state that the actual increase in journey times as a result of the closure along the main roads adjoining is a matter of seconds. Also, in relation to climate change, to actually reduce the consumption of fossil fuels in vehicles, we actually need to introduce measures like this to promote changes of behaviour. And again, as Councillor Hadley said, this takes time, and we shouldn't expect to see an immediate effect. But all evidence suggests that in the longer term, that will actually take place. Just to conclude, I think that the call-in was brought by councillors from outside the area. If one looks at the objectors, there are a number of Conservative activists in there that have objected. It appears very much to me that this is essentially a political ploy rather than a call-in that is based on either a proper assessment of the process or a desire to reflect the interests and policies of the council and local residents. And therefore, I would certainly say that the call-in really has no grounds. Although it was essentially approved by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that very much the decision was on party lines. And therefore, I think it's now up to the Cabinet to take the sensible decision and recognise that the closure was validly carried out and is acting in the interests of local residents and actually for the wider benefit of citizens in BCP when one considers issues of safety and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thanks to both you and Andy for your contributions. One point I just need to reflect is that it wasn't just on party lines, because we at least one independent member also supported the call-in decision. So now what we need to do is to move to the Cabinet debate, and I'd like to open that by asking our portfolio holder for sustainability and transport, Councillor Mike Green, to speak first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. And much of what I'll say today is very similar to how I spoke at the Overview and Scrutiny Board itself. And I very much thank them for their very balanced discussion on that, which I thought was also done in very good spirit. The starting position where I've made decisions on ETROs, including this one, is that I want to support the ward councillors if I possibly can. That becomes the central position from which I begin. What I then do is I look at all of the benefits and the disbenefits that come from that. As my evidence, if you like, for those, I take the consultation responses, I take the officer report, I take my own opinion, what I think is a little bit of common sense as well. And I then try to weigh all of those up and to decide whether there is a sufficient balance, if you like, for either the benefits or the disbenefits, which means that I should stray from the position that I held originally, which is that I would like to go along with the ward councillors. So in this case, the ward councillors, and it actually is on the junction of two wards between Poole Town and Oakdale wards, and they were strongly in favour of retaining the closure, and that's why that was my starting position. So I then go on to look at the benefits, and it's quite clear to me, and I think you can see from the responses that we've had both to the draft decision, but also the representations that have been read out from members of the public today, that there is a very substantial benefit to the residents of Tatnam Road. They've gone from having a pretty busy road to having what is close to a private road situation. And there can be no doubt that makes a substantial difference to the lives of those people on Tatnam Road. To be fair, that would be true for almost any residential road in the BCP area. So I think that is that needs to be kept into account, but there is a considerable benefit for them. There is also potentially a safety benefit. We've seen that there have been casualties at that junction, and this needs to be taken into consideration, as indeed all safety measures need to. I think what we haven't taken into consideration, because there is no way of doing so, is to talk about the safety considerations of the or safety impact of the displaced traffic that comes from this. But there can be no doubt that this is an accident cluster at that junction. So those are the benefits. Against that, we need to look at I needed to look at the disbenefits. And there can be little doubt that there has been some displacement of traffic away from Tatton Road and onto other roads. And we've seen it again in the representations that come from Haynes Avenue, Palmer Road, Stokes Avenue, Wimborne Road, Sturt Road. From all of those, they've been talking about evidence of increased traffic. We also need to recognise that there will be necessarily some increase in journey time, as Councillor Howell pointed out. The Saturn model, which is used, has suggested that once everything settles out completely, that journey time should only be, depending on which bit you look at, between 14 and 18 seconds should be the increase. We have seen claims from some of the people who've written in on this of journey time increases up to 15 minutes. My guess is that it's somewhere between them, and that the numbers will start to come down. If we do continue with the closure, that they will start to come down. But we are looking at some journey time increase, and we are also looking at journey distance increase. Again, there can be no doubt that moving traffic away from a short route and onto a longer route is going to increase those distances, and therefore come out with a higher carbon dioxide and other emissions numbers. So I think where we are then is that we see that there is a significant benefit for a relatively small number of people versus a much lower disbenefit for a much larger number of people. And what I then do is to assess that and to try to take a balance. And I think it is important at this point to talk about the dogma behind it. And we see that Councillor Hadley, who is not only the ward councillor but was also the cabinet member responsible when this was brought in, talks about traffic evaporation phenomenon, and he is right. There are evidence a lot from around the country, particularly in London, that if you make it difficult enough for people to drive, then eventually some people will give up on driving. And that is a legitimate dogma. It's not one that I subscribe to myself, but it is. And I also have my own dogma, and that is that I would like to see, that I want to create the position where people have the choice about how they travel. And in doing so, to allow them to have safe, fast cycle routes, gives them a choice that they have, that they can make. And I believe that in doing that, it will take enough people to say, well, I'll give cycling a go some of the time to make a real difference to the congestion of the road. And that's why I've been supporting the Transforming Cities programme so strongly. So it then came down to looking at this one and saying, is that benefit of a switch to cycling that comes about because people recognise this Tatton Road closure as being significant? And my assessment was that it is not particularly significant. We hear from people about how there has been some increase in cycling. Well, that happened all over the place over the pandemic, and we hear from other people how their own cycling has become more pleasurable and potentially safer if they're already using that route. But what I can't see is any real evidence which says this is moving people from being non-cyclists to being cyclists, which is what brings us that big benefit. So because of that, I don't see the big benefit that's coming in for the many. I only see the big benefit as coming in for those living on Tatnam Road. So when I then came to do a full balance between them, my opinion was that there was not enough substantial on either side overall to dissuade me from my initial position, which is that I wanted to support the ward councillors because they are those who should know best. And I think what I've tried to do in all of these ETRO decisions is to be absolutely consistent in the way that I have done that. And I hope to do so as I go forward. That was my central position. I didn't see a reason to move one way or the other because of it. So I hope what I've done is I'm making everyone aware of how I came to the decision. I still believe that it was right to come to that decision in that way, but I also recognise that Overview and Scrutiny Board have asked for the decision to be looked at again and looked at from fresh eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep quiet now, listen to the debate, and if it's all right, leader, I will not vote on the final decision because the recommendation from ONS has been that others should make the decision. But I hope that I've made clear the reason that I made the decision that I did. Thank you.
That's great and understandable, Mike. Thank you for setting it out and rationale really clearly. Okay, so let's move to the rest of Cabinet for the debate and then conclusion and decision on the item. Would any member of Cabinet like to speak on this item? Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Mike White. Thank you.
I think Councillor White was slightly before.
I do apologise, Councillor White.
All right, thank you, Leader. Just a short comment from me. I have been asked by Councillor Anne Stribley to bring something to the attention of this committee, as she cannot attend herself today. Anne, of course, was one of the members who was part of the original call-in at the call-in committee. What she's asked me to do is to show you her file of letters and emails received from residents. And just to show you that she's received some 88 letters supporting keeping the road open, and on the other hand, she's received some 15 letters asking for closure. And as I say, she asked me to bring this to the attention of the committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, then, Mike. Okay, I'll move to Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really just to pick up a bit on what Councillor White has also said. I went down to the area. I was doing some other work in that area and had a look and spoke to some of the residents. It's not a accurate poll, it's a straw poll. I spoke to people on the road, and it was quite interesting that the number of people who were anti it were those who lived in the surrounding roads, very close to Tatnam Road, and the people who were in favour of it were the ones only seemed to be the ones that lived on Tatnam Road. I'll just leave it at that. It was interesting from my point of view, and I did look at some of the responses that were in the paper, and again that seems to echo that comment.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to be as quick. I'm going to speak a little longer because I do, this is a particularly difficult situation, isn't it? Not least because I fully support the principle of supporting ward councillors' views on measures such as this as a starting point. That's what we've done before, and it feels like it's absolutely the right decision and place to start. The difficulty with this one is, what do we then do when their views are so clearly out of step with the views of the wider public? And that's where it becomes tricky. And I think Councillor Green, for his explanation of the difficulty he had in that background too. You look at the consultation results from the initial consultation, 80% of the public wanting it reopened, around 17% wanting it closed. And, I understand Councillor Howell's points, a lot of that positivity about the closure has been centred particularly on the road itself. And then you look at the 337 consultation responses that came in after the draft decision was published, and that was even more stark. 90% looking to reopen the road. And Chair, that's really hard to ignore. So what do we do? Do we listen, or do we just ignore and say that we know best? my view is that measures where cars are banned outside of a joined up strategic approach, like those, for instance, on the Transforming Cities route, achieve one thing and one thing alone. They just make people very, very angry. And that's not the way to propel forward the very worthwhile sustainable travel agenda. We all want to see less congestion, less emissions, better for environment, better for road users, as well as of all kinds. But we can't do that if people are at war. Therefore, I think in this instance, we have a duty to listen to the wider views of the public. Now, I don't think that this means that we ignore the concerns of others, especially those that live on the road. So while I will support the public and vote to see the road reopen, equally, I think we need to do what we always do and look at all the measures that could mitigate the issues on the road and in the surrounding area in the future, because banning cars doesn't work, but neither does doing nothing as well. So my suggestion is let's keep working and looking at what's possible across a sustainable travel agenda, in a much more joined up approach. But in this circumstance, I think we've got to listen to the public, and therefore I think it's important that we reopen the road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. And I think you make a really, really compelling argument there. I'm in I feel personally in a difficult position here because I'm really passionate about what we're trying to do in and around transforming travel and the transforming cities work. We had a leader question and answer session on our channels last week, and I was really passionate about making that same argument that you just made yourself, Mike, around your travel, your choice. We need to create choice for people to travel. Across the and we need to distinguish here. This isn't part of that transforming travel work. This is an individual road closure. So it's not about a program of closures. It's about a program of choice. And and I think you make a really compelling argument, Phil, when you talk through the extent of the feedback that we've received. I absolutely support that. The portfolio holder in his decision around the weight, he put on ward councillors across the board. But in this instance, do we have to consider, was there too much weight, compared to the absolute, raft of public opinion on this issue? We've stated quite a lot, and that we're trying to bring forward an argument where we bring people with us, across this debate, and you can't do that, as you've quite rightly said, if you're imposing effectively, closures on people without bringing them with you. So I think, on balance, I very much agree with your position, Councillor Broadhead. So, I think there was potentially, too much weight in hindsight on the ward councillor views. And I think we have to recognise as well that we've had a huge amount of representation, which I've read anything that's come through to me on, and I very much listened to for ward councillors and their reputation as well. But I listened to the debate and overview and scrutiny, and I was compelled by it. Particularly the comments around the due regard to national strategic local policy and guidance, and I think ultimately that balance between the overweight on the ward councillors and about strategic policy context as well. I'm minded to support if cabinet colleagues are minded to effectively the removal of this ETRO, but I'll look forward to the rest of the discussion. And in that point, I'll bring in Councillor Anger Mohan.
Thank you, Leader. I'll just make a few points, and there may be a repetition here of what some points people have already made. Just what occurs to me in this kind of much discussed and quite difficult issue. First of all, I will start with the belief that the road is part of a highway network which exists for the whole of, in this case, for Poole and then beyond, and especially with the road, which I know very well, Tatton Road, being a particular sort of an artery for transport. The benefit and the impact of having such a route is something that we need to take a broader view on as such, and not a narrow view on. And I think referring to some of the comments from the speeches earlier on, to comments like doing the right thing or listening to residents, that they're important statements, because as councillors, what's our job to do? Our job is to do the right thing, and also it is to listen to residents. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean those residents just in the immediate vicinity. Constitutionally, and as a former member of Poole Council, constitutionally we all signed up to represent all of Poole residents, and now as BCP councillors, and especially as cabinet members, constitutionally we're there to represent all of BCP's residents, its businesses and its organisations as well. And I think therefore the perspective that must be taken here is a broader one, which is what is the broader impact and benefit of the scheme, hence what the right decision is. That's also the view we should be taking as we pursue broader policies on sustainable travel, environmental protection, and so on and so forth. The consultation feedback has been referred to. 80% wanted the road open, so that result is clear. And I've mentioned the point about doing the right thing. I think what I'm swayed by in this is that this isn't something where we should be thin slicing and focusing on a particular lobby, but actually looking broader and seeing what's the right thing, not only for local residents, but for broader, in this case, if I may, for broader Poole. The safety does come up. The safety is important. It's been mentioned by many, and I think that's something that mustn't be lost sight of as we go forward with our decision in this. It must be given a priority, and I know through going up and down that road several times, I know with some of the comments there is something absolutely there about something to calm the place down somewhat, and I'll let the experts go further into how exactly we do that with something more effective in the future. But for the reason of taking the proper broad perspective on this one, I'm in favour of reopening the road. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, do I have any other members of Cabinet wishing to speak on this item? Okay, so in terms of what I've heard, I think there's a consensus around moving to a decision of reopening the road. For the benefit and to test that, I'll happily propose that if I have a seconder. Councillor Enger is seconded, so that's proposed and seconded. If no members further wish to speak, I'll move straight to the vote on whether we will effectively reopen the road. Okay, so all those in favour? Against? And abstentions? 1. Okay, that is passed. So thank you very much for debate on that item, Cabinet colleagues, and not unanimous because we had an abstention. But thank you very much for the consideration, and thank you again to the Chair of Overviews and Scrutiny and the rest of the board for the moving it to this stage as well. Okay, so then we move back to the agenda item as put, which is agenda item 7, Q2 budget monitoring 21-22, which I will propose. Really positive paper effectively in terms of it's a much improved position from where we last saw it in a Q1 report. Q1 we had an overspend of 12.6 million, a projected overspend of 12.6 million, and this moves us to a underspend of 4 million, which as the report says we'd look to put into unearmarked reserves. So it's quite a staggering movement in the period. The overspend effectively has been moved down to 10.2 million, but there's a raft of mitigations. Just when we're touching on the overspend of service pressures we're facing, primarily in the children's services, also to some extent in adults. So it's very much COVID related pressures. And we're all aware of how much extra provision and need there is for these vulnerable groups, and we're absolutely committed. But we are going to be spending on them. What we've been able to do is deliver some really positive performance across largely around the Place Directorate, Environment Directorate, which has been well received. Our revised financial strategy that we've brought in and voted on as Cabinet earlier in the year is really making dividends in around some of the extra work we've been able to do on the capital strategy. We also started this year with 8.8 million of government money, so it's called the Tranche 5 money there, and that's for COVID related pressures. What we wanted to do was to not put that towards the budget at the start of the year, because we wanted to put challenge in and around and not just have that money spent. We're able to in this paper move that 4.2 million pounds of that goes down to effectively get us a balanced position, projected position in the budget, which would allow £4 million of that money to go towards our earmarked reserves. So doing exactly what we said we'd do when we came into administration. We were, we inherited a £50 million MTFP gap. We're now getting towards a position where we've been able to close that, invest significantly in services, which I'll talk a little bit more about in terms of the medium-term financial plan report coming next. And then, as and when we're able to, we will invest further into reserves. So we are, this council's finances are as resilient as possible, both going forward into next year, which is still uncertain times, and also going forward from that. So very pleased with how we're going. I need to thank the finance team for their consistent and significant support, but also across the departments, because the challenge on delivering the services we've been able to deliver, but also how we can make some financial mitigations on that. So thank you very much for our colleagues for their support. Okay, so that's me. I believe Councillor Broadhead, you're coming into to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second the main points here. Clearly heading in the right direction. A tremendous amount of work gone on, not just within the organisation, but with all our partners as well, to keep on delivering the services. I think one of the things we've also got to be proud of, by taking that very steady approach, particularly around the government help that we've received for the COVID grants, we're now in a really good position to have people's back through this difficult winter period. When facing the new variant, we're having to step up a number of services. We're prepared for that. We're funded for that, and we're not left in a position scrapping around. And later on today, we're doing our next Facebook Live, where we talk around all of the support that we're able to offer all of our most vulnerable people and those that are struggling with these difficult times, precisely because we've had the foresight to have some good financial planning. So a really good position that we're in, and really looking forward to continuing to support people.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so now I'll move to the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, Councillor Bartlett, to see if you'd like to make any comment on his paper. I thought I saw your hand up, Steve. Apologies if that's now gone down. Are you looking to speak on this item?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just for clarification, we're talking about the Q2 budget monitoring report.
That's it, and it's the MTFP report we'll be doing agenda item 7 next. So this is Q2 budget monitoring. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, just a couple of items probably worth mentioning that were raised during the debate. And the first one was on a concern about recruitment issues and salary levels, particularly with regard to staff in children's services and adult services as well. Staff retention and recruitment issues, and the issues relating to salaries there. It was just raised an issue, and I'm going to be taking that forward with the overview and scrutiny, the relevant overview and scrutiny board chairs. The other issue was one of the effect of inflation on the capital programme, where we're seeing substantial increases through inflation on capital projects. And this does seem to be a concern, and it is putting, I understand, pressure on those programmes. And I think you sort of took that on board as well, Leader. But there were no recommendations coming out from the board on it, but just a couple of issues probably worth mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And very much. I think it was focused around the overview and scrutiny work which we can do. I think one of the things that gives me confidence in terms of very real inflationary pressures around a lot of our capital programme and across a wider environment is our revised approach to how we're funding our capital strategy, which gives us the opportunity to still deliver projects of quality even in that environment. What we need to now do is to make sure that that those inflationary pressures are well thought through, and effectively we try and still deliver as value for money as we possibly can, while delivering what is quite a scaled up capital programme. Okay, thank you very much for that. Do I have any other members wishing to join the discussion debate? I'm not seeing that, so I'll move to vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Okay, so we now move to agenda item 7, which is the medium-term financial plan update. Again, I'll be relatively brief in terms of introducing this, but the position put in front of us in this report is extremely positive. Just to give members a reminder of when we last saw this paper, there was a £25 million gap for next year, 22-23, and we've now moved this to a 5-year MTFP to give us better financial visibility for a longer term, and the 5-year position was an £87 million gap. The work that's gone on here now has got the gap down for 22-23 to as little as 7.8 million, and the 5-year period 44 million, so materially improved from where we were. Just to remind members, this is really underpinned by the ambitious transformation program we've put forward in and around trying to really drive the benefits of putting these 3 organisations together and become an absolute exemplar local authority. So fantastic work going involved in that area. I mentioned it before in the last paper, but our revised financial strategy and has allowed us to really drive forward some changes, have real more in confidence that we can invest, we can continue to invest whilst delivering a balanced budget for next year. In terms of the budget, we'll be moving forward with a budget paper. It will become public in January to be debated at the February full council. We had a really positive all-member seminar, budget cafe, where all members of the council were invited to really get under the skin of the numbers and suggest and challenge in and around how that budget is shaping up. We are very confident that the gap as represented in this report will be closed, and we will not only deliver a balanced or better budget outturn for last year, but be able to still deliver a really positive budget for 22-23. And I thank members and officers for their support in getting to that position. Probably all I need to say on the report there, the recommendations are as put. I'm very happy to move them. I believe Councillor Broadhead, you're seconding. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second, and I just, let's not forget that tremendous movement from a £25 million gap to a £7 million gap, and the not just the growing confidence, but the relative certainty that we'll be not only able to offer a balanced budget in the next month or two, but actually that budget will, because of a lot of the work that we've done and has been done in the organisation, be able to real focus on a lot of our priorities, the climate agenda, looking after our most vulnerable as well. So really looking forward to that budget, and I think that movement and that position is probably likely why there was cross-party support at the Overview and Scrutiny Board for this improvement and position. I don't think there are any questions on it at all. So hopefully we continue that support into the future. And once again, I'd just like to thank all of the staff that helped to make this possible.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, great. We have that proposed and seconded. Do I have any other councillors wishing to speak? Any members of Cabinet wishing to speak? No. So we'll move to the vote and the recommendations as put. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, so we now move to agenda item 8, which is biodiversity net gain. Really important piece of work that's coming forward. And I believe Councillor Broadhead, Phil, you are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you again to the Overview and Scrutiny Board for a really worthwhile discussion last week on this as well. For those that don't know, biodiversity net gain is the process of trying to make sure that any development that goes on, there's actually an increase in the biodiversity rather than a decrease. And the Environment Act came into force, Government's Environment Act, in November of this year, which now makes that a statutory requirement. So the Act proposes that all new developments will have to deliver a mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain, and crucially that has to be maintained for at least 30 years as well. So a real step change from the government, and something that local planning authorities in particular will have to react to. What the government also gave was a 2-year kind of grace period for that to come into being. So in theory, we could note that and just say that in the next 2 years we need to look at doing something. But what this paper does is propose that we go much quicker than that, be one of the first local authorities in the country to embrace this, to embed that into our planning policy, and try and be a real leader in this area. Not just because it's clearly the right thing to do, but also there's going to be some kinks that we're going to need to work out as we put this into practice. And it's absolutely right that we take the time to do that properly. We do that hand in hand with partners like Natural England, with our development community, to make sure that we can not just do this, but do this right. So as I mentioned, this is going to be coming in. We've got the 2-year transition period. We do already have aspects of biodiversity net gain within our existing local plans, but it's not really spelled out in a really defined way. The pool local plan includes a specific requirement to achieve biodiversity net gain, but it doesn't give a level. So, you know, this is important that we can actually prescribe exactly what we mean by biodiversity net gain. It's going to be complicated. Natural England in particular have been doing a lot of work around what this means and what processes that we'll have to follow. And that's why what is proposed in this paper is to set up a task force between the Planning and Environment Directorates to bring back within 6 months a framework for exactly how this is going to work. Because as part of the government's Environment Bill, there has to be a recognised and accredited scheme that's worked towards when we're actually considering this. There's a number of ways that this is coming through. Natural England has developed the Biodiversity 3.0 metric toolkit as the most up-to-date way of judging this. There are other, the 2 areas where it's probably the most difficult to judge biodiversity net gain are the very big sites and the very small sites. So there's things like the SSM and the small sites metric, which helps tools for smaller sites, and then the environmental benefits EBNT tool as well, which looks at not just how we get that biodiversity net gain, but we do it in a way that actually improves other things like water quality, flood management services, and carbon storage. So there's an awful lot that we're going to have to take into account while we're doing this, and that's why we take the decision to go very early, and then within 6 months come back and try and embed this into planning policy. The reason that this is such a scale of challenge is that, you know, we are a very big area. We have over 4,500 planning applications per annum in this area, and meaning that every single one of them has to demonstrate biodiversity net gain is not going to be a small task. So within this ask, we're also looking for extra additional staff, in particular 2 additional ecology officers. Some discussion about this at overview and scrutiny. This is not because those ecology officers are going to take all the weight on judging this, but they are going to be part of setting up the framework, training all of the planning staff so that this becomes business as usual within the planning authority. And again, I think it's really important that we do this early so that then we can embed that into the local plan, which will come later. So we could just wait to the local plan, but it feels like it's right to be going early, getting the gremlins out of the system, and being a leader in this area. That the final is that alongside putting that extra money in, alongside that extra training, and alongside that coming back within 6 months with a framework for how we're absolutely going to embed this, we're also saying that we don't just want to wait until then. So within the paper as well, we also say that we're going to start the process right now with every planning application of looking to seek biodiversity net gain on the sites that are coming in from now. So we'll have a much more refined framework within 6 months' time when the result of this work comes back in. But we're going now on this as well, and we're saying that we're embedding it from the off. So they're the headlines within the paper, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil. I believe we've got Councillor Dove, who is seconding the paper. Bobby.
Thank you. And after that rather marvellous introduction of this paper, I don't really have much more that I can add. I'm delighted to second the paper. I'm really looking forward to exploring the options on how this council is going to take the lead in moving this forward and proactively implement this area of the Environment Act ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. Great. Okay, so let's move to see Councillor Bartlett. Would you like to come in on this paper?
Just to say that generally there was overall support for this paper. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So yeah, and I'd just like to speak. You know, I'm really pleased that we're doing this early. You know, we are one of the larger authorities in the country. So I think there is a responsibility on us to actually show leadership in this. We've had some leadership nationally from the Conservative government in and around the environmental agenda, and I think the fact that we're as the largest Conservative Conservative controlled urban authority standing up to this and actually saying, well, let's do this now. We are passionate about delivering a world-class city region through our development agenda, but to deliver that means environment or development. It's, you know, it can't be that binary choice. We must do both. So actually, you know, really committing and being one of the first authorities to commit to this biodiversity agenda is something that I'm really pleased about. So thank you, you both for you know, your leadership on this, and also I think, you know, our planning team, in particular Nick Perrins, for work on the paper as well. So very pleased that we're seeing this. Do any other members of the Cabinet wish to speak on this paper? I've got Councillor Rampton and then Councillor Anderson. Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I just want to start off by congratulating the Leader and the Deputy Leader, because you've shown that commitment and that drive to bring forward this biodiversity strategy. And I also thank Councillor Bobby Dove and Mark Anderson, who's brought the paper today. And Councillor Broadhead mentioned that it will be mandatory, but there is that 2-year transition period. But, you know, there are areas in BCP where some of our residents, I won't name anyone in particular, but we know who I mean, who are really expert on the ecological issues, and they've been engaging with us for some time on biodiversity. So I'm really encouraged by paragraph 21, which talks about, you know, going immediately. And I'm just wondering, does that mean that we can really prioritise our most sensitive areas, even those which perhaps have already been through the planning system, but can we prioritise them? Because we really need to act now. And then just to finish on paragraph 22, alternative option is at this stage to do nothing. Well, that is not an option for the sake of our environment. That absolutely is not an option. So 100% support this paper, but I would like to know if there are areas where we can absolutely get going on this right away. Thank you.
Great. And what I'll do, I'll bring in Councillor Anderson, and then perhaps Phil, you could sum up. So, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I again, as the other two members whose names are on this paper, fully support this paper. I think it's an excellent paper, and I'm really pleased to see that it's coming forward early, because it does, as Councillor Broadhead said, does give us a chance to iron out some of the kinks and hopefully to set some of the agenda for the national government, so that they can see some of the issues that we have solved for them. Particularly locally, I think there's some really good schemes that are going to really benefit from this. I mean, the major one that really springs to mind is the Stour Valley area, the Stour Valley work that we're doing. But there are also all our lowland heathlands which really need to be protected, and we need to build on the biodiversity in those areas, particularly as they act as really good carbon sinks, and we need to look at protecting them and make sure that their biodiversity is maintained and hopefully improved, so we can increase the amount of heathlands that we have. I mean, we need trees, but we also need the heathlands, and we need the biodiversity, and we need an ecology approach rather than just specific areas. So I welcome this, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other colleagues wishing to speak, so Phil, I'll come back to you to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to colleagues for their support, and Councillor Rampton for her question, which I'll answer by saying that this doesn't need to be about winners and losers. So I know that there are some concerns within the development community that this is good news for the environment but bad news for the development community. Absolutely doesn't have to be there. This is not a joint binary choice between developing things or the environment. We can do it hand in hand, but we can only do it hand in hand if we work really closely with them. And that's why we've taken this approach of going early to get that framework working, both with, as Councillor Rampton has pointed out, some really really experienced people in the ecology world to make sure that we do this properly, but also with our development colleagues who are going to be building the homes for the next generation, to make sure that they view this as a positive as well, because that next generation also care about their environment. So it doesn't need to be bad news for some and good news for the others. So on the first point that Councillor Rampton raises, absolutely the whole point of taking this 6 months to get this right is that we can take into account all of the plethora of experience that we've got in our local area, and we are very, very fortunate to have all of that. Her second point, I completely agree with. Paragraph 21 is there specifically to say this isn't about waiting another 6 months to get this right. This is about how can we get this going right now, right quickly, very, very quickly. And actually, I'd go a little bit further than her in saying, are there some minor areas that we can can look at doing this at pace. Maybe there are some pilot regions, maybe even our own ward leading from the front, where we might well go, well, let's lead from the front, because we're ward colleagues, just in case you didn't know, Chair, where we might well go, actually, if we really want to get the kinks out of the system and demonstrate that leadership, nowhere better to do it than right on your own doorstep. So I'll be working really closely with the planning team to figure out what that could look like, whether we could be a pilot area and lead from the front, alongside that much more measured, stable approach of having a fully fit framework system within the next 6 months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Delighted to see ward colleagues working together so proactively. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so that's all the debate we've got on this item. So I'll ask all those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. All have been involved in that paper. Okay, so we move now to agenda item 9, which is Make Ashley Road Safe petition. And I'll start with Councillor Bobby Dove, who I believe is proposing the paper. Bobby.
Thank you, Leader. And just for background, this paper's come forward so that we can review and scrutinise the multi-agency work put in place in order to address the concerns of nuisance and antisocial behaviour on Ashley Road in Parkstone. The piece of work was started in June 2021, and I'd really like to thank the previous PFH, Councillor Haynes, and our community safety team for all of their hard work in approaching this head-on and having those difficult conversations in order to bring about the steps to make an improvement for the area. But also to the ward councillors who've been extremely supportive in providing their guidance and help in understanding the complexities of the area. It is early days, but figures indicate so far that the number of ASB incidents in the area are falling and people are beginning to start to see the tangible improvements for their area. But let's be clear, we are certainly not taking our foot off the pedal, quite the opposite. Sleeves have been rolled up and we have stepped in with a raft of measures and investment for the area to start to try and bring about the real change and real improvements so that we can benefit those who work, live and visit Ashley Road. And as a result of this paper, I've asked for an action plan so we can measure and continually review the work in progress. So, Leader, I won't go into all of the actions that we are taking, but I hope you'll allow me to mention just a few to provide a flavour of the work that is being taken forward. So we're investing £40,000 on an annual basis so that the area has a dedicated CSAS officer for Ashley Road. And this is a permanent investment which is being written into your 2022-23 budget. And I thank you for your support in this matter. Continuation of the PCG, which is the Partnership Coordinating Group, which will continue to meet monthly, and we will receive a tactical assessment detailing crime and ASB hotspots so that we can direct our measures accordingly. We will continue to support the CCTV system with 24 hours coverage and monitoring. And we'll continue to lead the multi-agency working with our partners such as Dorset Police, our housing department, outreach workers, Pivotal Housing Association, to mention just a few, and not forgetting ward councillors, of course. But we'll also continue working with our street pastors and the amazing support that they provide. And Leader, if it's okay, I'd really like to take the opportunity to put on record our sincerest thanks for the street pastors for all of the wonderful work that they carry out, and they truly are heaven sent. The PSPO, which allows CSAS officers and police officers to confiscate alcohol with those who are acting or likely to be acting in an antisocial behaviour, will remain in place. And following the environmental impact assessment, we will be looking at the environmental structures on Ashley Road, which may be leading to negative behaviours and preventing potential improvements for the area. So in conclusion, I hope this report reassures yourself, residents, business communities and the ward councillors of our continued action and commitment in taking this work forward. It does come with the caveat, yes, it is early days and our work is not yet done to bring about the whole-scale improvements that we want to see. But I'm clear that we will always continue to aim to ensure that Ashley Road continues to be the very heart of Parkstone communities and is a place where everyone can go and enjoy and discover its cultural delights. Leader, I so propose this paper.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dove. That's great. And I believe Councillor Broadhead, Phil, you are seconding.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second, and I wholly support this paper. It's Christmas now. That fell flat. Not least because of all the work that you've heard that Bobby and the rest of the team have been putting in. I think the summary of it is, others may complain, but we actually do something here, and it's a huge joined-up approach. There's a whole host of measures that Councillor Dove has outlined, from a lot of the small things, an additional one as part of our COVID support funding, where we're helping to support the Christmas offer in that area, to a lot of the major things, particularly around crime and antisocial behaviour. Councillor Nigel Brooks may wish to come in a little bit as well and talk about how we are going even further on top of the work that those teams have been doing as part of our district high street offer, which is a really similar and actually combined effort to just bring everything together. We do not have a shortage of people that want to see things improve, want to put their time and effort in to make things work. Well, sometimes we have a sort of shortage is coordination of that efforts. So this has started that journey, and actually we're going to be going a little bit further, but I won't steal Councillor Brooks' thunder in that arena. So really happy to second this paper. And can I just say as well, as somebody that uses this area, absolutely seeing the improvements on the ground as well. And that's what it's all about. It's about local people enjoying their local areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, both. That's great. Okay, I don't believe this item was seen by overview and scrutiny, so I'll move straight now to other councillors, and first of those is Councillor Earl. Millie.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks as well to Councillor Haynes and Councillor Dove for all their work on this paper. I just wanted to say a few words, both as the presenter of the petition and one of the 10 councillors who represents part of Ashley Road. Obviously, we had a very lively debate at full council in September, and I'm really pleased to finally see this report come to Cabinet and for the many actions to start. Once this paper was published, I did go out to residents and ask them to give me their feedback, particularly to those who signed the petition in the first place. And people did report that they had seen an improvement. So, a huge congratulations on that. I think you're right, Councillor Dove, there's a bit more of a way to go. And I think we're in a really good position to start that. Many residents did comment on environmental factors and sort of regeneration around some of our district centres, particularly on Ashley Road, and tidying up the area to try and make it a bit more welcoming. However, I did get quite a bit of opposition towards sort of removing benches and closing alleyways. So just to try and ask that that's done very much in consultation with those residents, because I think that there was very much a view that we'd rather keep them in the community. Another piece of good news is that residents have commented to me on how CSAS officers are taking quite a hard line on alcohol and street drinking. Someone even phoned me up to tell me that they'd seen someone pouring away alcohol on the street. And I think that was really reflected in the CSAS engagements that we saw in the Community Safety Partnership's performance statistics, showing that CSAS had actually intervened 230 times or something in where drugs and alcohol were concerned. So that's really encouraging. I'm glad the report acknowledges the vulnerabilities of those who street drink, such as the ongoing mental health issues and addictions, and it also talked about the balance between enforcement and support. However, one comment that someone sent to me which really stuck out was that there's only one action to address the underlying causes of alcohol-related ASB, which is the deployment of addiction support workers into the area to engage with street drinkers. I think that's a really great place to begin, but I'd also like some assurance that we're moving towards in reach, particularly into supported housing, of which we have quite a few places around Ashley Road, so that people are engaged really in their housing setting rather than just out on the street, to try and reduce sort of people then going out and using the street as a place to street drink. On enforcement, though, it's great to see injunctions are being issued and enforced. Different service areas and partners are all working together. 2 of the CCTV cameras have been updated, all of which has contributed to such a noticeable improvement. We still have a way to go, and we need to continue to work collectively and also be reactive as things do go up and down, as they have done in previous years, and also to work alongside residents and traders and try and regain some of that trust. I think that has been lost with the authorities over dealing with this issue for the last 3 years. So finally, just to say thank you to the portfolio holder, council officers, Community Safety Partnership, Police, CSAS, everyone who's been involved in getting us to this point, and for working together on this report. And of course, you know, thanks to the 2,000 residents, traders and shop workers who signed the petition, and the wider community, and hopefully we're going to have a much brighter future on Ashley Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Royal. Okay, what I've had a statement from the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Sidgwick. So what I'll do is I'll read that out, and then I'll come to the rest of Cabinet for their discussion. So this is a message from our Police and Crime Commissioner, David Sidgwick. Cabinet members will be aware that I made a full statement that was highlighted in Council, and I'd just like to emphasise the following points. Having taken an interest and highlighted the Ashley Road situation for over 3 years, now I am in office, it remains a priority to address. I visited Ashley Road early in my administration, and since then have delivered on a 100-day plan, ensured that Dorset Police have a priority to deal with ASB through Operation Relentless, and ensured that addressing ASB and crime is at the heart of my police and crime plan, which has been delivered 6 months early. I'm aware that thanks to close working between the police and the local authority that we are starting to address the issues. Having said this, I will not be content until the residents consistently feel that too. Therefore, in collaboration with the Community Safety Portfolio holder, Councillor Bobby Dove, we are asking for local councillors to join us to talk about further improvements early in the new year. A date is in the diary and invitations will be sent shortly. To drive for a better future, the police, council and community will need to work in harmony. I'm determined that the improvements will be sustainable and continue to be delivered in Ashley Road. And I thank very much the Police and Crime Commissioner David Sidgwick for his support in this area, and across the piece in and around putting antisocial behaviour at the front of his agenda, because when we've talked about our pride in place and the significant investment in cleaner, greener, safer, that's exactly what we're trying to do, and it's that working in conjunction I think will really make a difference. So thank you. Okay, now I'll go to the rest of Cabinet, and I have Councillor Nigel Brooks. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for this paper from Bobby Dove, and also the contribution a moment ago by Millie Owl. It really gives us a lot of background information, a lot of food for thought, and a setting for intervention and action. As Cabinet know, I am the lead member for High Street and District Centre Strategy, which was approved through Cabinet in September. And the actions from that sign-off was in fact to start looking at district centres to see with the officers team in economic development how we can actually find areas for improvement, responding to the issues brought to our attention through reimagining our high streets, which was a lot of research work done with residents back in April of this year. And what I can say is that in terms of joining as a multidisciplinary task force, the strategy for district centres will extend to Ashley Road. And we will start with the economic development team, together with all the partners who have been mentioned by Bobby Dove, to look at the aspects of Ashley Road as to scoping and finding aspects of improvement. That primarily, I guess, will focus on physical aspects. And my experience has been elsewhere where there have been antisocial behaviour matters, that there are physical aspects which actually can be improved upon and changed and actually contribute to the overall success of curtailing antisocial behaviour. So I'm very pleased to say to Cabinet that in the new year, the economic development team under my leadership will be looking very closely at Ashley Road. There are some 180 retail and business units on the road, and of those, food and beverage make up about 18%, which is probably quite normal for district centres through our conurbation. Voids are actually at 9%, and across again the conurbation, we have a void rate roughly around 10% at our district centres. So in many respects, the district centre is performing as it should do. Obviously, there have been issues through the pandemic which have had sort of curtailing of some businesses. But I'm very hopeful that we can actually make a very valid contribution to all the other teams who are working in bringing under control the problems that we have seen with antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. That's great. And I'll move to Councillor Rampton. Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Dove for bringing forward this paper, and to Councillor Haynes, who obviously played a major part in it as well. I'm just really interested to hear the comments from Councillor Earl, and it is Christmas, so I should be very polite and just say it's really great now that Councillor Earl and some of her colleagues seem to understand and support that need to resource the CSAS officers, because that's a major shift for them, isn't it? They didn't seem to understand that before. But Ashley Road, it's somewhere that where I go to shop. I use the library. I go up there not on a daily basis, but certainly several times a week and speak to people. And the general consensus seems to be that it feels very safe. And just looking around, we're all about clean, green and safe, aren't we? It's not particularly green, but it is certainly clean and it certainly feels safe. I would agree that we should be very careful about trying to remove benches and stop up alleyways. I don't really think we want to go there, because that's used by people who need to have a wee seat down, sit down when they're waiting for the bus or something. So I wouldn't support that. But I would just like to say congratulations to Councillor Dove and everyone involved in making the improvements in Ashley Road, because it really is noticeable. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do I have any other members of Cabinet wishing to speak? I've got Beverly Dunlop and then Mohan. Beverly.
Thank you, Leader. I live about 2 minutes from Ashley Road, and I think it's an amazing place, to be honest. It's one of those bustling high streets that I remember as a child, where you'd go out in the morning and you go all the way at one side, get what you needed, cross over and come all the way back. And I think it's still there. It really is still there. When you look at the selection of shops there, and it's quite unusual, things that you don't get in a lot of places. I think that Councillor Dove is putting a really good platform here in place, and with Nigel, with the district centres looking at that, there is so much potential there, and it's good that the traders are coming together, and I think there are so many. I'm going to call it window dressing or things like that we can do, and that's a superficial word. It's if you look at the area, it needs, I'm to use Councillor Rampton's phrase here, zhuzhing up. There are some things that we can do to just lighten it, brighten it, green it, look at some space that can be used for some events, some animation, and I think get people to fall back in love with a place that they already do actually love and use it. And as I say, I think this is a great platform. I think it's a good place to work on with district centres and to show that we can reinvigorate areas and bring them back to life again.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think in that whole Vibrant Places portfolio that you're leading on, that's going to be a large part of that. So thank you. Councillor Engar, Mohan.
Thank you. Also very much in support. My congratulations to Councillor Dove and others for this progress. I just can't help sort of juxtaposing it with an earlier discussion we had where it was about sort of thin slicing and in one ward. And many people will know the Ashley Road is a long road, and it used to be 6 wards that bordered on Ashley Road. I think it's now 5 after the boundary changes. So this is an initiative which affects a very, very large number of people who either live close to it or frequent the Ashley Road for whatever they do. So this is again within the theme of sort of thinking big, thinking about what can affect and what can improve a large number of residents and businesses. I fully support it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much all. So I don't have any other Cabinet colleagues wishing to speak, so I'll move that to the vote. The recommendations as put. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. Okay, so that moves us to, I believe it's agenda item, schools admissions arrangements 23-24 for community and maintained schools. Councillor Nicola Gregg.
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, colleagues. I have a suite of 3 documents to present, which are all to do with school organisation, I suppose is the broad topic. And it may become a challenge if my battery doesn't last for the 3rd of them, but we remain hopeful. The first of the papers is, as you set out, it's a request to go out to consult on the Council's admission arrangements for 2023 to 24 for community and maintained schools. And of course, most of these have a reception entry. So we're actually currently consulting for the admissions arrangement for 2-year-olds. And it shows how much preparation needs to go into ensuring that we reach our duty of providing enough school places. Each year the Council goes out to consultation. There are no significant changes, no changes on the policy itself this year, but there is a slight change in the admissions number, and that reflects a request of the governors at Burton Primary School to reduce their published admission number from 60 to 45. As I say, that's at the request of the governors, and therefore as Council we support it. So with that in mind, Chairman, I move the recommendations A and B, and just to say that this will come back in due course. It'll come back to Overview and Scrutiny, who looked at this at their last meeting. So the findings will come back to their meeting on the 25th of January and to Cabinet on the 9th of February. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll look to Councillor Mike White
to second. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on this paper? None that I'm seeing, so I will move to the vote. And I'll ask all those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. And Nicola, I believe you said you had 3 papers in a row, so we'll go to you again for agenda item 11, which is the home to school transport policy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is again a request for Cabinet support for us to go out to consultation on the draft home to school transport policy, and again to delegate to the Director of Education to commission that public consultation. In one sense, this is a tidying up exercise. One could argue that there are 3 existing policies from the legacy arrangements, but actually there's a far more human dimension to that, in that this is our first opportunity to consult with the public and to understand the movements of our school-age population within and occasionally beyond the boundaries of the conurbation. It does look to unpack, to undress some of those inconsistencies and the wider contextual issues, such as children and young people in Year 11 who are moving in year, our arrangements for 16 to 19-year-olds, and indeed 19 to 25-year-old young people with education, health and care plans. It includes the appeals process and children in temporary housing, children in care, and fuel wear and tear. I would urge anyone who can to participate in this consultation. The more information we get in, the better our output will be. And again, I will be bringing the findings forward in due course. Slightly different sequence to the previous paper, in that it will be going to Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny on the 22nd of March and back to Cabinet on the 13th of April. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, I'll go to Councillor Mike White. I believe you are.
Happy to second, nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Mark Anderson. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I really do support this paper. I think it's a very good move. I have spoken to the Corporate Director and also to Ms. Rampal, who's the author, in my role as an ex-Bournemouth councillor, Chairman of Appeals. So I have a lot of experience of actually chairing the Transport Board, and I know the issues and the problems that are related to it. So I think this is a great paper, and I really recommend that everyone have a read of it and support it. So thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'll endorse that as well. Perhaps I don't have any other Cabinet colleagues wishing to speak, so I'll come back to Councillor Nicola Green.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Anderson, for raising that. I did rather skate over the appeals process, but that can be very difficult and in some cases actually an unnecessary process for parents to go through. So the more clarity that we get through a well-consulted policy, then the better that guidance will be, and the smoother that journey through the process should be for all our families. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, so we have nobody wishing to speak for any further, so I'll look to move the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Unanimous. Thank you. And Councillor Green, for your third paper, agenda item 12, capital expenditure to enable bulge classes at the Avonbourne schools. Nicola.
Thank you again, Leader. I'd just like, before I start to introduce the paper, to be absolutely clear that everybody is looking at the right version. There has been a relatively late change, which I will speak to and explain, but I just wonder if the Chief Executive is available, whether he could just confirm for everybody that we have followed that process correctly.
And I'll bring in Graham Parrott now. Graham.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, very happy to. This was an amended paper that circulated on the 9th of December. I don't like either late papers or amended papers, so apologies, but this was to give greater clarity around the financial implications, and I think the recommendations were just clarified. So that paper was circulated on 9th of December, I think has been sent to all councillors by email as well, so hopefully everybody's got the right version in front of them.
Thank you very much, and yeah, happy to confirm I certainly have. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Graham, for that clarity. Apologies. Thank you. And to be clear, the substance of the paper has not changed from that which went to overview and children's overview and scrutiny at their last meeting, and I'm very grateful for their comments and their support for this. As I say, this is the third in the suite of documents, and this is what happens when you get to the point where you haven't got quite the right number of school places and you need to make sure that they're available in the right place. Members will have heard me say many times that school place planning is an inexact science. Of course, it reflects the need of our population, preference of parents, and a whole host of other factors, such as just general population movements where people are working, and so on. So it's really important that we have a little bit of flex in the system, and we are seeing that there will be an anticipated increase, but a bulge rather than a forecast growth. So to make it clear to colleagues that numbers can go down as well as up. And this is one of those instances where we're anticipating a small number of increased Year 7 children coming into the system, but we're not looking to make a permanent expansion anywhere. So we're grateful to the United Learning Trust for their flexibility in moving this forward. For those of you who know it, and indeed those of you who don't, Avonbourne Girls' School and Avonbourne Boys' School are co-located on a large site in the Littledown area, and the Academy Trust have been very flexible in accepting that we're not currently quite sure where the places will be needed, but they have the accommodation and the will to help us make sure that the places are provided for the right gender at the right time. We don't require a new building, but there will be some significant remodelling and refurbishment, and that will ensure that the correct teaching and ancillary spaces are available to deliver those places. It is, as I say, there's been a slight change in the recommendations, and those are, as the Chief Executive mentioned, to provide some clarity to make sure that the legacy allocation from Bournemouth Borough Council, which expected there to be a significantly larger number of places required, that's to be removed from the capital programme. And I do apologise to members for the late change to this. There is also a very sensible amendment in paragraph 17, if I can draw members' attention, just make sure everybody is clear, that this will either be funded by supported borrowing, which we've originally discussed, or indeed from the capital grant funding, according to the advice of the Chief Finance Officer. I think we're all aware that we need to use the money that we have available to us in the most sensible way, particularly when it's grant funding from the government, particularly focused for this purpose. So again, thanks to Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny. And if I may just make a further comment, came from the ward councillors. I have noted it, and I did mention it in Overview and Scrutiny, but it doesn't seem to have made its way, and apologies for that, into the final report. So I'm looking at Democratic Services and asking if they would record in the appropriate way, either with the minutes or in the finalised version of this document, those comments from the ward councillors, Councillor Dove and Williams. And they're concerned about the potential impact on traffic movements for their local residents, and have asked for the school to keep their travel plans under review in the light of any pupil increase. And I think that's a very sensible recommendation. They are, of course, like me, fully supportive of £500,000 or thereabouts, up to 500,000 in going into improving the premises of the schools. And I think we all hope for an improved learning environment for our children. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you ever so much. And I believe again, Councillor, what you are.
Yeah, once again, very happy to second this, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, do I have any other members wishing to speak on this paper? None that are showing. So thank you very much for the revised recommendations, which we will now vote on. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now we move to Councillor Mike Green for agenda item 13, which is the concessionary fares bus operator reimbursement. Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. We had a similar paper coming a few months ago to Cabinet. Basically, the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme, or bus passes as we'll call it, is organised with all of the local travel concessionary authorities around the country, of which BCP is one. And fundamentally, what it tries to do is to arrange that each of those authorities reimburses or gives money to the bus companies for every journey that originates from within that area by somebody who holds a bus pass. And the way it's arranged is so that it leaves the bus company in no better or no worse situation than he would have been had that person been paying for the bus fare. So there are a few little bits that go into it, but bluntly, it's us paying for it. Now, during the COVID pandemic, the bus patronage, as you would assume, has took a real tumble. We got down to about 10 to 15% of the pre-COVID levels, and although up until last week, and until Omicron came onto the scheme, we were up to about 60 to 70% of pre-COVID levels. It's still a very difficult situation for the bus companies financially. And bluntly, had the government not supported them financially, first of all through the coronavirus bus service support grant, which ended at the end of August, and then moved on to the bus recovery grant, they were unlikely to survive, or potentially they would need to be cutting all bar the most populous routes to be able to do so. And so what the government has done is they asked previously that up until the end of this financial year coming, that we should support, and all local authorities involved should support the bus companies to 100% of the pre-COVID levels as far as a reimbursement for bus pass users is concerned. And for us, that is approximately £8 million per year. Without that money, as I say, the bus companies would be forced at least to reduce the coverage very considerably. So although there was no obligation, absolute obligation legally for the local authorities to pay that full amount out, unsurprisingly, everyone did. Apart from anything else, as we heard on a previous paper today, the government has been supporting local authorities to be able to get through the pandemic financially, and so it's really a bit of a circular movement of some of the funds as we go through. So for us at the moment, the budget is marginally over £8 million. There has been a slight reduction because of the slight reduction in services available. So there is a potential or probable saving this financial year of about 350,000. But what this proposal comes forward is to suggest that we will continue that until the end of the financial year, but then in an attempt to wean the bus companies off the public support, whether it comes from national government or whether it comes from local government. The DfT issued a note at the end of October and this, which is what this one is about, which says we will continue at 100% of funding at pre-COVID levels up until the end, or up until actually April the 5th. And then from April the 5th, the commitment will be to support it at 90% of pre-COVID levels. And that figure acts as a floor, reducing by 5% every 2 months until we hit the actual patronage numbers. So it would be, if we followed this, then 90% of pre-COVID levels for the first 2 months from April, then it would go down to 85% from June, another 5% from August, and so on, until hopefully the number of people using those buses has risen up to the level of the support that we're going to give, and that will then continue as pre-pandemic. If that were to go through, then by the end of the financial years, if patronage levels on the buses are still down at their current 65% or so, again that was pre last week, then we would expect that the floor at 65% will be activated, and then that will be the last that we're doing, and then we would go back to matching the actual patronage levels with the support that we are giving them financially. I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, is really what would happen if we don't go ahead with this and bus companies are forced to start cutting services. And you can see on page 189 of the report what I refer to as the cycle of despair. Is basically as you start to withdraw patronage from withdraw support from the bus companies, so at that point the number of people using the buses starts to go down, they become less profitable, you end up pulling more support out, and so on as it goes through. This is obviously somewhere we really do not want to be. The second, as I mentioned earlier, is this paper was put together from the government paper and also our own before the Omicron variant became prevalent, and before the more recent guidance on work from home, which is likely to depress bus usage levels once again. So this is something that we really are going to need to keep our eye on as we go forward over the next 15 months or so. But I think it is important that in passing this paper, and I will move that recommendation, that we are very clear in our support for the bus companies. We recognise what huge value they bring to all our community, particularly those who are not necessarily able to or don't wish to get around by car, the more vulnerable elements of our society, and particularly those who are less able, and to effectively declare now that how much we value them, and that they will know that we will have their backs as they go forward. So with that, I'll move the recommendation, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I'm very much happy to second this. Appreciate it's a large financial commitment, but it's a financial commitment we absolutely have to make. And I really do also take your points, Mike, regarding how there's a likelihood of a further financial commitment we will need to show if we want to maintain bus services that we currently have. We talked earlier on, haven't we, in terms about your travel, your choice. And again, having a really resilient and strong bus service, and we're pleased to be served by two decent bus companies. So we need to try and support and maintain as and when we can. So thank you very much. Do I have any other? Sorry, just checking over your scrutiny. No, I'm not seeing that. So I do apologise, Councillor Bartlett. Can I bring you in? I believe this was discussed at the ONS meeting.
Yes, Leader. Only to say general support for the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. Do any other members of Council Cabinet wish to speak on this paper? Not that I'm seeing, so I will move the recommendations as put. All those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous. Thank you. So then we move now to agenda item 14, which is the housing scheme at Herbert Avenue, Poole. And I'll move to Councillor Broadhead to propose.
Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to bring this paper forward, which is around our new housing scheme at Herbert Avenue. Colleagues will maybe remember at the 29th of September Cabinet, we unveiled our Council New Build Housing and Acquisition Strategy, CNAS as we're calling it, which is our big plan, our programmed approach to delivering new housing sites across the area. And there's 24 different sites in that. And pretty central to that new plan is to have this programmed approach so that we're not doing things in a piecemeal fashion, and crucially also that we don't have to bring every single one of these to Cabinet. And the aspiration going forward is that we'll probably be having twice yearly Cabinet updates which talk about the work that's been doing and seek the necessary permissions. So why, I hear you ask, are we then taking a piecemeal approach for this one? Well, the answer is because this one fell slightly out of step with the strategy. The preferred bidder from the original procurement process withdrew earlier on this year, which meant that we then had to re-engage the marketplace and to find a new bidder and then bring it back. And the costs have gone up slightly, which is why we have to bring it back to Cabinet today. So first of all, why have the costs gone up? Well, the costs have gone up because the costs of everything, frankly, have gone up. We've seen a 24% increase in construction material costs since 2018, and that's why we're seeing a very similar increase in the procurement, the delivery costs from the new partner that we have to actually deliver the scheme. And what I can say is that without naming the current preferred bidder here, because I don't think we've actually finalised, it is a local developer that will be delivering this scheme, which I think is absolutely really positive. What is this about? Well, this is a really positive scheme of 24 new temporary accommodation units for families, which will help to relieve the existing reliance on bed and breakfast for temporary accommodation. We've done a tremendous amount of work through that already, particularly through Seascape Homes and Property, where we've been buying longer term homes for people where traditionally when they've found themselves in a homeless position, and that can happen to anybody, they've somehow had to be in bed and breakfast. So we've already done tremendous improvements in that area, but we're at the time of year where it's more stark than ever before. In my opinion, nobody should be forced to stay in bed and breakfast over the Christmas period or in any period, and this is yet another step to make it so that we've got an extra provision so that isn't the case. And also we've got a stepping stone approach to getting people that find themselves out of that position into a much more sustainable long-term residential environment. The scheme itself therefore is for temporary homes. We've got one bedroom, one bedroom and 22 bedroom apartments. What's really interesting about the way that this scheme is designed as well, it's done with a kind of not modular system, but it's flexible accommodation. So if in the future we can find and even we see the numbers of people finding themselves in this position decrease, it could easily be reprovisioned in terms of its internal layout into more long-term solutions. We've been working really closely with the local community. We've worked closely with the local school to make sure that the development, because it's right next to one of the school fields, is fit for purpose. And I'm really pleased with how the actual the development has turned out. And, for the avoidance of that, this will be affordable rent housing for which the demand is really high across the area. That's the kind of people side of it. There's also a huge cost saving outcomes of stopping that reliance on bed and breakfast placements. At the moment, the weekly cost to the council of these apartments will be about £159 per flat. That's that with the weekly average cost of bed and breakfast, £294. That's a half the amount, and a much better long-term environment. People will find themselves in that position. So you're actually looking probably at around £170,000 of revenue savings just by not placing people in bed and breakfast. Quite aside from the fact that it's clearly a much better position for them to be in. Final point, as with always, when we're looking at these things, the climate emergency is at the top of our agenda. This is another scheme following on from recent ones, including Luckham Road, which complies with passive house standards. So it's really highly energy efficient as well, low carbon heating requirements, low cost to the tenants that will be staying there as well. And I had a look around our most recent development, Luckham Road, recently, and the standard on offer is really, really high. So in future, we'll be bringing forward a much more programmed approach. It won't be projects like this on a item by item basis, but either way, I think this is one to be really proud of. The team have done a really good job, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming hopefully 24 families to these when they're constructed shortly.
Yeah, absolutely, very much. And I'll come to Councillor Karen Upton to second. Karen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and I'm absolutely delighted to second this. This has been a long time coming, and that's due to circumstances outside of our control. I'm absolutely thrilled that when this accommodation is built, we'll be able to house 94 people. That's 94 people who will not have to go into unsuitable accommodations such as bed and breakfast, particularly unsuitable for families, and always a challenge for people who have some additional needs. And I'm really pleased that this development will have apartments for people which are accessible, and that colleagues already mentioned the passive house principles. That will keep people's heating bills to an absolute minimum. And if you're on a very low income, that's actually really significant. So I think it's a great thing. Can I just correct a couple of things on the paper, Chair? Sorry, I should have said that right at the beginning. It's actually got my name on it, but it is Councillor Broadhead, not me, as it is housing delivery. And also we've got Alderney and Bourne Valley spelt wrongly. So I just, typo. So I just wish to point that out. So fully support this paper. Really wish we could have it sooner, but I'm sure it will be built to time and certainly to budget. And I shall look forward to the opening day. Thank you.
Absolutely great, and I'll just absolutely echo that. As a previous pool councillor, we've seen this, historically, so it'd be fantastic to get this moving forward. So thanks for all the work that's gone into it. Councillor Nicola Green.
Thank you, Leader. I would say that while I understand Councillor Broadhead's view that it's nice when everything's wrapped up together, actually I'm really pleased that this paper has come separately, because I think it's a proposal that we really do need to be not only proud of, but that we have delivered the option in a really serious frame of mind. We take our responsibilities to all our residents for providing homes wherever they are, whether it's new build for private rent or it's people who are really struggling, and to be building temporary homes for people to take the time and the space that they need to get back on their feet, as Karen was saying, where they can access low cost heating and really start planning, getting the services, and not need to move out during the day, as is sometimes the case in bed and breakfast. So I am enthusiastically and warmly behind this paper, and thank you so much for bringing it forward.
Great. Okay, I don't see any other members wishing to speak. So thank you very much for the contributions on this, and we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Great. Okay, so that brings us to largely the close of our business. We've got agenda item 15, which is for urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive, which to date there are none. And then that moves us to agenda item 16, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan, which was, I'll just remind members, was published, the latest version of it yesterday. So we all have the latest version of that. And I'm not seeing any members wish to speak in relation to the Forward Plan. So it just leaves me to thank members and officers for today, to wish everybody a very happy Christmas, and including members of the public who have engaged in this. And we will also, I think it was mentioned earlier on, at 1 o'clock today, we've got latest in our round of leader presentations, leader sessions across all of our platforms. So it's not just Facebook Live now, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and that's Winter Resilience, which Councillor Broadhead will be chairing for us. So thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you again. Many thanks. Bye bye.